Fyodor Dostoevsky. I'm sure you know the name. He's an absolute titan of world literature, right? His novels dive into the darkest corners of the human soul. But what if I told you that his own life, the very source of all his incredible insight, was forged in a single, unbelievably terrifying moment? A moment that would change everything.
No, really, take a second and think about that. If you knew for sure that in 60 seconds it was all going to be over, where would your mind go? What would you think about? This isn't just some late-night dorm room question. For a young Fyodor Dostoevsky, this was terrifyingly real. So, picture this. It's a freezing cold day in a public square in St. Petersburg. A group of prisoners, and among them is a 27-year-old Dostoevsky, are being led out to be executed by a firing squad. The air is just thick with dread. This isn't a story yet. This is happening. And the ceremony of it all is just chilling. I mean, this wasn't some quick affair. It was a public ritual designed to have the biggest psychological impact possible. So first, the death sentence is read aloud. Then, the men are told to kiss across. In this really intense, symbolic move, swords are broken over their heads. And then, the first 3 prisoners are tied to the pillars. Dostoevsky was in the next group. He did the math. He figured he had, at most, 1 minute left to live. Okay, so you have to be wondering, how in the world does a promising young author end up here, a minute away from being shot? He wasn't some violent revolutionary. Let's just rewind a little bit and see what led him to this awful moment. You see, Dostoevsky wasn't always this literary icon. He actually started out as a military engineer. But writing was his real passion, and his very first novel, a book called Poor Folk, was a huge hit. It got him into all the important literary circles in St. Petersburg. He was really on his way up. And that's where the trouble started. He joined something called the Petrushevsky Circle. Now, on the surface, it was just a discussion group for young, smart, liberal guys. But they weren't just chatting about the weather. They were all fired up by these revolutionary ideas sweeping across Europe at the time. They were talking about banned books, getting rid of serfdom, pretty radical stuff. And for the iron-fisted Tsar Nicholas I, this was not free speech. This was conspiracy. So in 1849, Dostoevsky and the others were all arrested. And for just discussing those ideas, the sentence was death. So that brings us right back to that freezing square, where Dostoevsky is watching the first 3 men tied to the pillar. He said his goodbyes in his head. The firing squad is taking aim. The order to fire is just seconds away. And then, something you'd only see in a movie happens. Just as the shots are about to ring out, a messenger on horseback gallops into the square, waving a white flag. He's got a message, straight from the Tsar. The execution is stopped. But here's the absolutely brutal twist. This wasn't some last-minute change of heart from the Tsar. Nope, he had pardoned the men the day before. The entire thing, the public square, the breaking of the swords, the firing squad, it was all a meticulously staged performance. It was a mock execution, a sick, cruel form of psychological torture designed to break them with terror and then make them feel profound gratitude for being spared. I mean, you can just feel the raw shock in this letter he wrote to his brother just a few hours later. He had lived for 45 minutes with the absolute certainty that he was about to die. He faced the end, and now, suddenly, he was alive again. And this quote just shows you how his entire worldview changed in an instant. It wasn't just relief. It was a total reevaluation of what it means to exist. After standing on the brink of nothingness, he suddenly saw the infinite value packed into every single second of being alive. He didn't just feel like he got a second chance. He literally felt like he had been reborn. And this whole idea of rebirth, of a spiritual resurrection after you go through immense suffering, that would become one of the most powerful themes in everything he wrote from that day forward. But look, while the Tsar gave Dostoevsky his life back, he sure didn't give him back his freedom. His death sentence was changed, sure, but a whole new punishment was waiting for him. His new sentence? 4 years. 4 years of hard labor in a brutal Siberian prison camp. He was shipped off in shackles to live with the absolute worst criminals in the harshest conditions imaginable. And it didn't even end there. After 4 years in that hellhole, he was forced into 6 more years of mandatory military service, still out in exile. All told, a full decade of his life was just gone, wiped out by this punishment.
So what does a person do after that, after a decade of such deep trauma and suffering? Well, for Dostoevsky, the answer was obvious. You write. But you don't just write, you pour all of that pain and suffering into some of the most powerful art the world has ever known. You can see him working through his trauma right there on the page. In his novel, The Idiot, the main character, Prince Mishkin, tells this story over and over again about a man who faced a firing squad. He describes in unbelievable detail the thoughts that race through your head when you think you have just minutes left to live. It's Dostoevsky reliving his own nightmare through his character.
His return from Siberia was like a dam breaking, a flood of creativity. And you can feel this experience in all of his masterpieces. Think about Crime and Punishment. It's about a man crushed by guilt, searching for redemption. That's a journey Dostoevsky now knew intimately. In The Brothers Karamazov, he's wrestling with these huge questions of faith and doubt and morality. Well, of course he is. This is a man who thought God had abandoned him, only to have his life handed back. These weren't just stories anymore. They were explorations of the human soul, forged in actual fire. And his influence today, it's almost impossible to overstate. The way he explored the human heart still resonates all over the world. His books have been translated into more than 170 languages and turned into over 120 films. That just shows you how timeless his work really is. So when you boil it all down, what's the real legacy of this one terrifying day? Well, it's way more than just a dramatic backstory for a famous writer. It's a really profound lesson about life itself. The things he learned about the human psyche because of his own suffering just broke new ground. He ended up influencing not just other novelists, but giants of philosophy like Nietzsche and Sartre, and even the father of psychology himself, Sigmund Freud, who thought Dostoevsky was a master psychologist. This quote just perfectly sums up the lesson he learned that day, doesn't it? It's such a powerful reminder that even when we're suffering, the capacity for joy, the simple, incredible gift of just being alive, is always there, if we just stop and choose to see it. So here's the thing you absolutely have to understand. The mock execution wasn't just an interruption in Dostoevsky's career. It became his career. It gave him his mission. That single minute, staring death right in the face, gave him a lifetime's worth of material and a profound insight into what it really truly means to be human. Dostoevsky learned in the most brutal way imaginable that life is a gift and that every single minute could be, in his words, an eternity of bliss. And that really leaves all of us with a pretty powerful question, doesn't it? What will you do with the minutes that you've been given?